Good morning and welcome back. I'm here with Bruce Rose. Bruce, say hi to everybody.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world.
All right, how is our sound? Do we have great sound? All right, sound is good. So once again, I'm Jenny Williamson, Executive Director of the C3 Foundation. On behalf of myself and our founder and CEO, Claudia Christian, we are so glad you are watching our second annual virtual TSM conference, Stronger Than Your Drink. Please feel free to use the chat function if you're watching live on Twitch to ask questions all throughout the panel. I'll be collecting them and asking our presenter your questions during the Q&A following the presentation. This conference is available to view and to participate in for free thanks to our two co-headline sponsors, RIA Health and Work It Health. If you would like to support the work of the C3 Foundation, there's a donation link in our profile, and we have a timer that'll drop a donation link into the chat during the conference. Also, if you're on Twitter, please feel free to live tweet our conference with the hashtags StrongerThanYourDrink and Options Save Lives. It's a great way to amplify the impact of our conference. Next up, we have Bruce Rose, the founder of Alcohol Recovery Scotland, presenting about the importance of a support program. Bruce has a number of years' experience working with individuals in drug and alcohol dependency through his roles working for a homeless charity night shelter and as a deputy manager and manager of drug and alcohol residential rehabilitation centers. His background and training was originally abstinence-based models. Bruce began researching other models of recovery and found Claudia Christian's TED Talk on YouTube. He initially switched it off with the comment, "What a load of rubbish." Following further research, he came to realize that the Sinclair Method worked, just as Claudia has said. Bruce now works with clients exclusively with TSM and has a passion to share his experience and learn knowledge on TSM to date. His goal is to see TSM readily available to anyone in Scotland, and he is also one of the coaches in C3 Foundation's own Your Sinclair Method TSM coaching site. On a personal note, Bruce's passion to work in addiction comes from 6 years' lived experience of addiction in his early 20s and the loss of his own father to alcohol addiction. Bruce, whenever you are ready, I'm going to go ahead and take myself off the broadcast stream and turn it over to you.
Okay, good afternoon, everybody. Or good morning or good evening, as I said at the beginning, depending on whereabout in the world you are. Just a very quick, brief background on myself. Jenny was right. When my background was working in alcohol and drug rehab center management, I had a drug issue in my 20s. And whilst I was working in the rehab centers, all the rehab centers were abstinent-based programs, obviously. We worked very closely with peer support groups. We worked very closely with other rehab centers, but everything we did, as in everywhere in the world, it's all abstinent-based programs. I did see Claudia's TED Talk. If you haven't seen it yet, please go and have a look at it. I switched it off halfway through. Every time I speak to Claudia, I apologize to her. Because I'd worked in the abstinent world, I thought, what an absolute load of rubbish. I had never heard of a success rate of anything over 20%, let alone 78%. Anyway, long story short, I then started looking into the program. I thought I could take a little bit of that program and add it to a program here. But the more research I did into it, the more I realized, hang on a minute, this is starting to make a lot of sense from a scientific point of view. And it makes a lot of sense from the stories that I'm hearing. I went on the internet and I couldn't find anything negative about it. So long story short, I decided to work with one or two clients initially to try it. And I saw client after client after client after client succeeding on the Sinclair Method. Long way around to explain. 2 years ago, I run an organization called Alcohol Recovery Scotland here in Scotland, working with clients in the UK. And I work exclusively with the Sinclair Method now. I don't use abstinent-based programs or anything else. I am a believer that it's not one size fits all. However, I do believe in common sense, and if something has got an 80% success rate, it's a good option. So that's my background. But very, very quickly before I start, I've just mentioned it to Jenny before we started, but I just want to say a huge, huge thank you to the C3 Foundation. If it wasn't for the C3 Foundation, for Claudia, I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing. I know a lot of people around the world wouldn't be doing what they're doing. And the impact, it's not just that, it's the impact that it's having on other people's lives is massive. So thank you to Claudia first and foremost as well. You're doing an amazing job. And Jenny as well. The unseen work that Jenny does behind the scenes is amazing. So thank you very much to them. And I'll mention Dr. Sinclair later on, but without him, I heard Claudia say last night that he needs to go up for a Nobel Peace Prize at some stage because the work he's done is amazing. Absolutely amazing. Anyway, I would just like to spend a bit of time this afternoon just talking a little bit about the program support. Just a quick disclaimer up front. I'm not a doctor. I don't have any medical training. Here in Scotland, I work very, very closely with Scotland's leading addiction specialist. He did the original trials or clinical trials here in the UK for naltrexone and nalmefene. So he is, I believe, the leading expert, addiction expert, and he also understands the Sinclair Method, which I'm just so privileged to work with him. But we work very, very close together. Now, what he does is he does all the medical side. He does all the prescribing for me. And then what I do is I look after the program side. Now, the program side, the longer I'm getting involved with the Sinclair Method, the more I'm starting to realize the importance level of the program side of things. The first thing that I've learned over the last year is that there's two sides to the whole process. The Sinclair Method, or pharmacological extinction, or however we word it, we take naltrexone, it reduces the flow of the endorphins, and as a result of that, we get a much lower reward for when we drink alcohol. That's the Sinclair Method pharmacological extinction. That's the neurological medical process that's happening in an individual's brain. The other side of it is the program support. Now, I decided to offer program support because that's what I was used to doing in the rehab centers. But the longer that I go on with the Sinclair Method, the more I'm learning and the more I'm realizing that the program side, the support side of it is absolutely vital. There are people who can go through the program. I know Claudia did it. It took her a few years, but she did it. There are some people that can go through it without the support side of it. But we do notice, and I do find that the success rates increase with a good structured support program. And I'll run through that very, very quickly as I'm just sharing a few things today. The process has, like I said, very, very two specific sides. The program side is where I'm an expertise. I know we've had doctors on yesterday, and the doctors and all the medical people have the medical skills and knowledge to understand the medicational side of things. I've learned everything I've learned from Claudia, from the C3 Foundation, Twitch things, from Zoom, from lots of different other places. But I've started to notice a very, very common pattern that comes through every single client that I work with. And through that process, I now realize that when I'm working with clients, there are three very, very, very specific stages that clients will go through on the program. Now, I take everyone from the program right the way through a 6-month program. So the first stage is what I call the initial drop. Well, let me just backtrack a little bit. When I'm working with a client, I ask them to do three things. The first thing is never, ever, 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 ever have a drink without a pill. Now, that's just a standard thing in the Sinclair Method. You'll hear that everywhere. I didn't come up with that. I'm not a clever boy. The next thing I ask people to do is I ask them to send me a drink diary every single week with the clients. So again, thank you to Jenny. I use Jenny's Excel sheet that she made up, I don't know how long ago. We still use that here in Scotland. But if you're not using an Excel sheet that Jenny's made, then I know there's an app now that does it, even if it's on a piece of paper. Whatever you do, keep a drink diary, your daily drink diary on a weekly basis. And then the third thing I ask clients to do is to get in touch with me once a week. So I have a weekly appointment with clients every single week to work through the program with them. So that's what I'm doing. But just going back again onto the three stages, I am absolutely fascinated and amazed at. I ask clients when they come on the program, I do an assessment with them, and one of the first questions I ask is, what is your alcohol intake before you start the program? So in this country, we will use units. I know in America you use drinks, which relates to units. It's a slightly different way of measuring it, but whatever it is, it is. In this country, we use units. So I ask clients to note down on their drink diary how many units they were drinking before they started the program. Now, let's just say it's 100 units. That's about 10 bottles of wine a week here in the UK. I ask everyone to send me a drink diary, and I ask them to send it to me once a week. Now, the one thing I've noticed on almost, I would say 98% of the diaries that come through to me, I will see a drop in the first week to 2 weeks of 30 to 50% right across the board. And I've had one client just recently that it didn't happen with, and I had another client who went to about 60%, which is a little bit too much in the first week or two, depending on the level of what they're drinking. But it is. I wish I could sit and show you diaries tonight, but I can't for client confidentiality. But there's just diary after diary after diary. There's that drop of 30 to 50% in the first week to 2 weeks. So when I get a client on board, what I'm doing with them is I'm just saying to them, take a half pill the first day, take a half pill the second day, and then move up to a full pill. And then just drink as you feel led to drink for the first week to 2 weeks and take your pill. I'm just checking for side effects, making sure that people get onto the medication properly. And then what I'm then doing after that is I'm just saying, keep a track of all the amount you're drinking. And then at the end of the first week and at the end of the second week, I'm just looking at how much of a drop we've got. Now, the minute I see that drop happening, I'm looking to see that drop's happening. So I know, number one, the medication is working. And number two, I'm looking for a new level. So what the naltrexone is doing is sitting on the receptor in the brain. It reduces the flow of the endorphin in the brain, and therefore the brain is not chasing that buzz as much as it is from day one. I would say within 24, 48 hours, it happens like that. And that's why I see that initial drop, that straightaway drop. It doesn't happen with every single person, but I've noticed it with almost, I haven't calculated the figure, but I would say it's around about 95% to be safe. It's right. It is a very, very common thing to happen. So I see that initial drop. And then what we do is after 2 weeks, we then go into what I call the manual reduction process. Now, you're going to see a lot of people in the Sinclair Method who will see that initial drop and then it levels out. Now, that is, I hear it time and time and time again. And at that point, it's normally at week 3 where it is very, very common for my client to phone me up and say, it doesn't work anymore. It stopped working. Can I up my dose? Can I try this? Can I do that? I need to do something different. It stopped working. And I said, no. I said, it is exactly because of the diaries and because of the patterns that I've seen. I said, you are exactly where you need to be right now. The first 2 weeks, it will drop, bang. I don't normally tell a client that's going to happen because I just want to see it happening. I said, you're exactly where you need to be. And I said, now we are entering stage 2, and stage 2 is a manual reduction process based on habits. Now that when I say habits, the habits include emotional, psychological, circumstantial situations. So when somebody drops down, I had someone came to me the other day, they dropped down, they phoned me up, they panicked. It's not working anymore. It's not working. And I said, don't worry. I said, now we need to go into the habitual side of the change. So that manual reduction process can take anything from 2 months, I would say, to 2 years. Now, I'll come back to that later on as to why that happens, but that period of time is different for every single person. Once it then gets right the way down to what we would call pharmacological extinction, at that point, we then go into stage 3, which I call maintenance stage. And at that stage, the only bit of advice I give to someone is never, ever, 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 ever have a drink at any stage for the rest of your life without taking a pill. The process, you can relapse very, very quickly without taking the medication. So again, I'll come back to that in a second. But that's the maintenance. The stage 3 is the maintenance level. That's when people decide to either go abstinent or they decide to drink socially or once a week or whatever it is. And again, it's reversed the neurological process in the brain, and it has brought the reward from I'll get really geeky with you now, 1,200 nanograms, or 1,000 to 1,200 nanograms down to where it should be. So it's controllable and people aren't chasing that buzz. And that then rewires the brain over a period of time. As Dr. Sinclair would say, it actually rewires the brain and takes away the addictive craving side of things. But the manual reduction process is absolutely vital. I've spoken to so many people that I see, they drop it, it drops down 30 to 50%. It sometimes goes up just a little bit and then it levels out. Now, when I say it levels out, it doesn't stay at one level perfectly every single week. The downward curve on the graph on Jenny's lovely Excel spreadsheet, which we love, it doesn't just go lovely right the way down. It goes down and up a little bit. So that drop will, it was Katie Lane who said it to me the other day. She said it allows you a comfort blanket as you're reducing. So that stage 2 is a reduction process. Now, what I'm doing on a week-to-week basis on that reduction process is I'm getting someone's drink diary on the Monday. I have the appointment with them during the week and I sit down with them and say, okay, we've dropped from 100 units to say 70 units initially. Okay, and then what I'm doing with the drink diary is I'm not looking necessarily at the totals. What I'm doing is I'm looking at the patterns that are coming through on the diary. So that I have a very quick look at the total, and if the total's at 70 or 65 or 80, okay, that's great. We know where we are at the moment. What we're then doing is I stress to client time and time again, I don't care what is on your drink diary. The only question I have for you is, did you take your pill? And if they say, yep, I say, I don't care what's on your diary. Whatever's on your diary, fantastic. It's great. We can deal with it. So it drops down to say 70. And then what I'm doing is I'm looking at Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. And this is why Jenny's thing for us is so great, because it's got Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday on it. And I can tell exactly what pattern someone has for drinking. Are they drinking less during the week and more at the weekend? Or is there a day of the week where it goes up a little bit more? Or is it just one day when it's suddenly gone up and down a little bit? So I'm looking for a pattern that's going on in there. And then from that pattern, I can then put together a very structured reduction program for that individual. And I find that side of it is amazing. Now, this is the massive thing that I learned was when I worked in abstinence-based programs, the reduction, people used to go on reduction programs, so they drop a bit and drop a bit and drop a bit. Now, what happens on an abstinence-based program is that the craving starts to kick back in again because we're not dealing with the craving in the brain. So people will reduce and reduce in an abstinence-based program. The craving kicks back in. It then starts to creep back up again, and it goes back up to where it was before. So that's an abstinence-based program. Now, the reason the Sinclair method is so successful is that it sits on the receptors, it reduces the flow of the endorphins, and it drops it to a level that the brain doesn't kick into craving mode, and it can say, okay, I'm happy with that reward. That's why we still get drunk. That's why we'll still get a reward for drinking, but it's not going low enough that it kicks into craving mode. Now, that's one thing, but the vital thing is as we are reducing as we're going on that reduction process on stage 2, what is happening is as you are reducing slowly, the craving is not coming in at the back of it. And that is absolutely vital. The number one cause for relapse is craving. The number one cause. I saw it happen time and time again. Now they package it as, they'll package it as it's a trigger, or it's this, or it's an argument with your partner, or it's this, that, and another. Rubbish. It's craving. that trigger is the spark that lit the fire. The fire is the craving mode. So as you are reducing, or as I'm reducing someone, what I'm doing is I'm watching and listening every single time I speak to someone to see what is happening. So I'm reducing we're setting goals and reducing. And as we're reducing, because the craving is not kicking in at the back of it, that reduction program should be very, very comfortable. I used to say easy, but it's not easy. It's comfortable. Now, very, very quickly going back on things is as I'm watching someone reducing on that process, if for any reason it starts to level out, or if it comes down and then picks up again and spikes again, we just sit and look at the diary. If someone goes, they've got 10 units, 10 units, 10 units, 30 units, 10 units, 10 units, 10 units, I go, okay, something happened on Thursday. What happened on Thursday? Nothing really happened. Oh, no, hang on. Something's happened on Thursday to increase that drinking. So, I had an argument with my partner, or this, that, and another. So it's gone back up for the day. I said, okay, the only question I have is, did you take your pill? And they say, yes, I did. And at that stage, I'll say, well, listen, you took your pill, and therefore there is no problem. And the reason, what I learned, it was actually Dr. Perron, who is a coach on the C3 page. I heard her say this on the very early Zoom meeting that I was on with her. She said that when it comes to drinking, there are two sides to the whole process. One side is craving, and one side is habit. The craving side is the physical process of what is happening as a result of drinking. Your body becomes dependent on alcohol. That's the craving and the addiction side. The habitual side includes emotional, psychological, circumstantial situations. Now, I don't have the book with me right here. I normally do. No, there it is. The Cure for Alcoholism. If you haven't read it and you've got any interest in it, please, please, please buy it. On one of the pages there, it will talk about the craving. After about 90 to 100 days, the craving is almost gone. It drops and drops and drops and drops. Now, once that craving is gone, then you can very, very comfortably start reducing as you're going down the way. So that manual reduction process can be done alongside the reduction on the craving. Now, I was way off on a tangent there, and I've completely forgotten where I was going, but I will come back to it in a minute. It was a good point, whatever it was. But that reduction side of it is absolutely vital. I can't stress that. Sorry, that's what I was going to say. The difference between the craving, the physical side, and the habitual side. That now, if someone comes to me after 90 to 100 days and say, oh, but I'm still craving, I've learned from reading Dr. Sinclair's studies and information is I still to this day, I can't determine on the phone whether someone has got a craving or whether it's habit. I still don't know what it is. However, I then go back to science and I say, okay, and I look at the diary, okay, you've been on the program for more than 100 days, therefore it's habit. That's the way that I've kind of looked at it. So, and in that case, it is not craving and it's not habit. So the medication has dealt with the craving and the habit. So what we now need to deal is the reason you're continuing to drink is because of habit. Have I got time? Yeah, I have. So the first, I could never understand, and I heard Claudia talk about it last night, or was it Jenny? It might have been Jenny. They were talking about alcohol being a learned behavior. And I thought, well, hang on, is it a learned behavior or is it a medical issue? Or is it? And I always used to get confused with this. But what I learned, or what I've been learning, is that when you're young, you have a drink, it releases endorphins in the brain. And as a result of that, your brain gets a reward. So you go, oh, that was nice. And you do it again the next week. Now, when you leave school, you go to work, you get under stress and you think, hang on a minute, when I had a drink before, it made me feel a bit happy. I'll take that as a result of stress. So your brain builds up neurological pathways and it learns, if I get under stress and have a drink, it will release it. If I want to just feel good and have a drink, it will do that. If I want to go to a wedding and have fun, I have a drink. So it builds up all those neurological pathways in all those different situations. So your brain learns through habit that if I do this under this situation, I will get this reward. So your brain learns that. Then what happens is after a period of time, I hope this isn't too controversial, but when it comes to things like dry January, now this is just my opinion, this is not the C3 Foundation's. Jenny's probably panicking at the moment. It's nothing bad. I am not a fan of dry January. I don't do dry January at all. Now, the reason for that is because there's the deprivation principle. People don't drink for the whole of January. At the end of January, it's built up, and they go bang, and they hit it harder than they used to. But what I was trying to get to there was that with the abstinent-based side of it, the longer people are going without alcohol, then the more the craving is building and building and building and building. So again, I was going off on a point on that one, and I'll come back to that in a second. You'd think it was early morning here in Scotland. But going back to the craving and the craving side and the habitual side. So the habitual side is as people are reducing, what I'm doing with people as they're reducing is I'm just watching the diaries as they're dropping and coming down. Now, that's what I was trying to say. So after a period of time, what then happens is I know that it is habit that's causing that. Now, if it is habit that is causing it, the biggest fear that people have as they're reducing, is that if it goes back up again, it's going to spiral out of control like it always used to do in the abstinence-based programs. So what I've got to do with the coaching side of things is I've got to emphasize to this person and say, listen, it will not get out of control. I have an expression called trust the process. You have to learn to trust the process, that if you've been on 30, 60, 90 days, then as long as you're 100% compliant with your medication, if you hit a stressful situation in life, have an extra drink or two to deal with that situation. Give yourself that comfort blanket to get through it this time, learn how to cope with it and learn some coping mechanisms so that the next time it happens, you can deal with it with a little less alcohol. The hardest part to reducing your alcohol level and stopping alcohol, once the craving is under control, because it's not craving, it's learning to adjust to life without the alcohol. So that's the hard part on the reduction process in stage 2. So as you're reducing, the hardest part is learning to readjust to life without the drink. So as you're reducing down, if it spikes back up again, as long as you took your pill, don't worry about it. It's not a problem. Just be aware that what's happened. Claudia will always talk about it, being mindful. Be mindful about what happened. I had a client who would it was dropping perfectly, and then one day it spiked up again. She'd had an argument with a partner. She had an extra bottle of wine, and she dropped back into what I call abstinent-based thinking, which prior to that, the guilt, the shame, everything else. I said, whoa, stop. And I said, you've had an argument. It's an increase on the habitual side, the emotional, psychological side. The craving is dealt with. It will not spiral out of control. Trust the process. It will not spiral out of control. And therefore, just be aware that when you have an argument with your partner, the first thing you do is go for a drink. So next time it happens, go for a walk, go into the garage, punch a punch bag for half an hour, but give yourself permission to come back and have 3/4 of a bottle of wine instead of a bottle, and then have half a bottle, and then have a quarter of a bottle, and make those changes slowly. So what I'm trying to say is during that process, the manual reduction process, it's all to do with circumstances, all to do with emotions. It's all to do with habitual side of things. It is not the craving. The craving is being dealt with. You get that initial drop because it sits on the receptors and reduces the flow of the endorphins. But the continued level is as long as you stay compliant, which keeps the level low, is all dealing with habitual, emotional, psychological side of things. Now that period, for some people, will take 2 months. For some people, it will take 6 months, 12 months, depending on where you are and what your circumstance is in life, and how easy it is to adjust to it. So that's the craving and that side of thing. And then once you get down to the maintenance level, once you get down to pharmacological extinction, at that stage, again, what I will do with some clients is I will sit down with them and say, okay, now what you're doing on the Sinclair Method, and you're making those habitual changes as you go through. Just for example, if you've got a client who is drinking from 10 o'clock in the morning right the way through, the secret with the habitual changes as you go through, I see people they hear a good idea. Now, if you hear any good ideas, write them down and apply them in the future. Don't try and change it every single week to what you're doing. So find one thing that works, a little thing that works, do it for 2 or 3 weeks. I call it cement it in. Once it's cemented in and become habitual and you've built up new pathways for that, then adapt something else and do something else. So if someone's drinking from 10 o'clock onwards, all I will do with them, they'll say, oh, well, I need to have an alcohol-free day. No, you don't. No, you don't. You're not there yet. We need to build up to that. So go from 10 o'clock to 11 o'clock. Let's see how you cope from going from 10 o'clock to 11 o'clock. So we do that for a week. I speak to them the next week. I get the drink diary. I'm not interested in the totals. I speak to them the next week. I say, how did you get on going from 10 to 11? If the answer is absolutely, yeah, no problem, because there's no craving kicking back in, that 10 to 11 should be easy. If it is easy, then we'll go, okay, next week, let's go 11 to 12. Just keep it simple. Don't complicate it. Don't go into 20 other things. Just do one thing this week. After 5 or 6 weeks, that person will not be drinking before 5, 6 o'clock in the evening. And you do it very, very slowly. And as a coach, I've got to slow people down, because I've come from a background where I had an addictive nature. We want to do everything yesterday. So I need to slow people down. We want to make very little changes over a period of time so that those changes are sustainable and then long-term. There's no point doing 3 alcohol-free days this week and not being able to maintain it. The best way is to work to it gradually, slowly but surely, as you come down through your drink diary, work with a drink diary and keep it dropping down. And that's that side of it. And then once they get down to that level, I'm then saying to people, okay, we've clawed back an hour here and clawed back an hour there, and we've changed the spirits, or your hard liquor, as you'd call it in the States, to beer or wine. You're starting to claw back. In abstinence and before the Sinclair Method, alcohol was controlling everything in your life, or most things, a lot of things. The Sinclair Method, each little stage that you make, you're clawing back a little bit more control and a little bit more control until you get right the way down where you are in complete control. You're at pharmacological extinction. You choose if and when you want to drink. Now, if someone is choosing to drink socially, if they're not going abstinent, I will say to them, okay, now we need to change our mentality towards alcohol. You still need to know that you have to, whatever you do, take your medication. But the very last stage is we need to turn around to alcohol and say, okay, because of the medication, I have worked this program, that I am now in control. Now, that doesn't mean that you don't have the pill. It doesn't mean that everything is absolutely perfect. It just means that you need to develop a positive attitude. If you're going out for a meal, have a nice glass of wine and give yourself permission to go out and enjoy that glass of wine if you're not going to go absent. But always in the back of your head, whatever you do, never forget what I'm going to say right now is never, ever, 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 ever miss your pill. Never miss the pill. But that last stage is the alcohol. The reason I do that is alcohol has been the enemy for 5, 10, 20 years. You've been told that through abstinence-based programs. It is the enemy. It's just, everything is just bad about it. So once you get down to extinction, we need to just reverse the last little bit of control over it. The power it's got over you is, yes, I need to take my pill. Just one final example. I've got epilepsy. Epilepsy, it releases too much electricity in the brain. My receptors, I think it is, releases too much electricity in the brain. And as a result of that, the brain's only way of dealing with it is to have a seizure, and it goes from there. Now, thankfully, I use a medication called Epilim. Mr. Epilim, or whoever it was, the equivalent of Dr. Sinclair in the epilepsy world, he found this medication. You take the medication, it sits on the receptors, it reduces that amount of electricity in the brain. It allows me to act and function normally with the medication. The minute I stop taking the medication, I'm going to have a seizure. Exactly the same with the Sinclair Method. It is not a moral failing. It is not a spiritual failing. I've got a very strong Christian background myself. So I'll say that from a Christian point of view. It is not a spiritual failing at all. It's a neurological, medical situation that's happening in the brain. Now, if you choose to use a spiritual side to work through, absolutely fine. If you don't, absolutely fine. It is a medical issue, a neurological process that's happening in the brain. And as we work through that, we then start to understand it. And then it's exactly, like I said, it's exactly the same as epilepsy. So therefore, epilepsy is an illness. I take a medication and everything's fine. Alcohol use disorder, alcohol dependency is a medical condition. I've got to be quite careful how I say this one as well, is because I've got epilepsy, I don't have to go to a 12-step program. If anyone said to me, "You're epileptic, Bruce, you need to go on a 12-step program." Why? I have a medical condition that I've had some issues with it. There was a period of time I couldn't drive that emotionally scarred me when I was younger, I suppose. There are emotional things that I need to deal with because I've got epilepsy. I can't join the police. I can't skydive. I can't do this, that, and another. So that does have an impact on me. But I don't need to go to a group and put my hand up and say, well, I'm a bad person because I've got epilepsy. Alcohol use disorder is exactly the same thing. And thankful to the C3 Foundation and Claudia and Jenny, because the work they're doing is that they're promoting all that side of things. But that whole side of it, that's how I do things. And it's a very quick overview of things. But the program side of it, I'm obviously in the UK and stuff, but I know most people will be in the States or somewhere else. If you've seen a drop and then it's leveled up and it's not going where it needs to go, get on the C3 website, get hold of Claudia, get hold of Dr. Perron, get hold of Katie, get hold of one of those guys who knows how that program works, and they will talk you through it. It's a very, very set structure. Everything I know and I've learned from Claudia and Katie and bits and pieces from all over the place. The support side, I see the success rate. I've started working with people that haven't had support, and all of a sudden they said it wasn't working before. I saw this drop and then it just leveled out. And then the minute you start working with them, say, well, that's fine. Now we just need to make some habitual changes in stage 2, emotional, circumstantial changes. All of a sudden they start to see success happening. And they go, oh, wow, this is incredible. Well, it's not. It's just because we now start to understand you're taking the medication. There's no craving kicking in now. I'll hold your hand. Let's walk through that process with you. If you're not on a program, get on one. Okay, I think that's about me. One other question. I'll just one question that comes up quite often with me is how long does the process take? And then I'll pass you back to Jenny. The process will take on stage 2. How long does that reduction? People say, how long does the Sinclair Method take? And I said, I don't know. Until I start working with you, I don't know. Because that habitual change is based on circumstance, situation. It depends on how long you've been drinking, what's happened in your past, what's your current circumstance. You might be in a situation where the marriage is really difficult, your home life is difficult. It might be that next week you lose a loved one, or you lose a pet, or something. So situations are going to come up and arise. So we can't say a definite 2 months, 3 months, 4 months. The nice thing about the Sinclair Method is, as you're reducing, is if you hit a life situation, you can level out at that stage, and as long as you're taking your pill, you can deal with the situation, you can deal with the loss of the loved one, you can deal with the situation, and you can maintain it. And then once that's settled down, the emotional side and the circumstantial side is settled down, you can then carry on the process. If it was abstinence, you don't have that comfort blanket, you have one drink and bang, you're gone. The Sinclair Method is the most incredible program that I've ever seen. Jenny.
Thank you, Bruce. We've got some audience questions. So while those continue to come in your TSM clients, what would you say your overall success rate has been?
In the first 2 weeks, 95%. I will see that drop. When I say success, I would measure it as 30 to 50%. I would say 95% of people. And then after that, I would say 70%. And I would say that, and based on people in this country, we measure it by 14 units a week. So people who've gone abstinent or got down to 14 units or below and maintain that for at least a month or 2 months. And the way that I measure that is not the period of time, but it's how are you white knuckling it? Are you stressful? Is your anxiety going up? Are you constantly thinking about alcohol? All those answers are no. We're there. So I would say about 70%.
Okay, wonderful. And your medical colleague, does he prescribe naltrexone or nalmefene or both?
Just naltrexone, purely for side effects.
Okay.
Purely for side effects.
And what is your approach to people with comorbid, significant mental illnesses?
The doctor I work with, I work very, very specifically with an alcohol reduction program leading to abstinence. That's what I call it. Now, our doctor is an addiction specialist in doctor. So what I would suggest in situations like that, I am not trained in that area. And I would never, ever. I'm trained in recognizing things as we're going down. So, and if I'm ever in any doubt, I will speak to our doctor, and then I will connect the client with our doctor, and then our doctor would either then have a one-to-one consultation with them, or will signpost them, we would call it signposting in this country, to a medical professional who can deal with that. And then we would carry on the reduction program. A lot of the times, the reduction program can help out and either solve the situation, or if it's an underlying issue, then we need to bring the drink down anyway. So we would then work alongside a medical issue. But that does happen, obviously, but it needs to have medical intervention as well as program support.
And you talk about the initial drop, and a lot of people who don't have support don't see such dramatic week 1 and week 2 drops. Do you do you chalk that up to an increase in motivation, or is it the accountability of having a support program, or are those people who you're working with just in general have more robust support systems to begin with? What do you think that is that contributes to that?
Good question. Very, very good question. I tend to do as little, this is going to sound really bad. I tend to do as little as I possibly can in the first week, because what I'm doing is I just want to make sure the medication is working. And the way that I judge that is it drops. Now, I've only had a few people that it hasn't worked with, and it's not down to the support. It's because I will deliberately not say to people what I will expect to happen in the first 2 weeks, in case it's like a placebo and I'm telling them and they suddenly go, oh yeah, okay, well I dropped and that. So I don't say anything to them deliberately. And I say, take your half pill and drink as you feel led to drink the first week. And then I see that drop. Now, sometimes if that doesn't happen, a lot of the times if it does happen, it tends to happen with the heavier drinkers, the people who are more chronic. Now, the people who are more chronic drinkers, they are then in a habit of drinking at that level. So what we then have to do is we just have to get the medication under control, and then we actually have to start the manual reduction. I would guess, I don't know about who's asking the question, but I would guess that the level of drinking is more chronic, that doesn't happen.
And tell me a little bit about the relief you see on your clients' faces when they have those bad nights or bad weeks and they come in after their drinking has spiked, and you ask them if they took their pill and they say yes. And you say, okay, it's good then. From a standpoint of reducing the shame and the stigma, how impactful is that on your clients?
Perfect question. Absolutely, utterly huge. Absolutely huge. Abstinence-based programs are run by great people, amazing people, but it's been a program that they've had for many, many years, and it was the best program 20 years ago. It was the best thing around 20 years ago. However, abstinence-based programs is drinking or not drinking. So when people do drink or relapse, they don't understand what's happening in here. So the only way that they can logic it out is, okay, you chose to have the drink. So they put the emphasis back on the person. So anybody, and that's how society thinks as well, unfortunately. So anyone that's been through a program themselves, they relapse and try again and relapse and try again. The peer support group, the family, everyone else, you've made a mistake, you've made a mistake, you've made a mistake. Eventually, when you hear that enough, you'll start to believe it yourself. Why can't I do this? Why? I've tried it. It's just stop drinking. Why can't I do this? Then what happens is the guilt builds and builds and builds and builds. So when they come on it, I am constantly emphasizing to clients, it is not your fault. You have to take responsibility for what you do under the influence, but it is not your fault what is happening. And the number of people that I have in tears on the phone, people will phone up and they'll say, I had a bad week last week and I don't know what I did. I said, shut up. I said, I don't want to hear it. And the number, I said, it is not your fault. You had an argument with someone. It is not your fault. You're not a bad person. And I would emphasize it again. And with some people, they needed to hear it a bit more than others. Every single new client I speak to when they're phoning up to inquire, I say, this is what's happening. It is not your fault. I have person after person after person that bursts into tears. And thanks to Claudia and what you guys are doing, and just that area in itself, we need to change it. We need to change it because it is not a moral issue.
So we've got about 2 minutes left. So I've got 2 questions for you. So real quickly, what are some of the things you coach people to do on their alcohol-free days?
Any sport, any activity that will get the endorphins flowing, natural endorphins. Sport, walking, running, dog walking, any activity.
And then one final question that I'm asking everybody. How does the Sinclair Method make your clients stronger than their drink?
It gives them the self-esteem back. They start to realize that number one, it is not their fault, and number two, there is a solution. Most people have got to the point where they've given up. I can't do this anymore. So the strength comes in the self-belief of themselves to trust the process, and eventually they get the trust back in themselves. And the process is mind-blowing. When you get to work around it daily, it is mind-blowing.
Well, thank you so much, Bruce, for participating in our second annual TSM conference, Stronger Than Your Drink. We'd like to thank our sponsors, Work It Health and RIA Health, for making this conference possible. We are going to take a short break and prepare for our next panel. So get up, stretch, stay hydrated, and get ready for our next presenter, Jessica Shea Frey. Thanks, Bruce. Bye.
Thank you.